So Shalom Lachem, my friends. We'll see what we can say tonight, just among us. We said that we are going to continue. We are going to learn the 10 Commandments. Learning something means that you have to learn it in depth, to discuss it, to discuss every facet. Otherwise, if you go through the 10 Commandments, you could go through them in 5 minutes. At the same time, you could go through them for the duration of 10 years. That's at least how much Torah there is, just for the 10 Commandments. As we have discussed last week, the 10 Commandments are in fact 10 foundations, in which 613 branches, the 613 mitzvot, emanate. For each commandment there are hundreds of laws, Jewish laws. So you understand that the 10 Commandments have to be studied carefully, and no matter how long we will study it, bear in mind that it's still only a minimum. There's no end to the Torah. No end. The Torah is, like it says in one of the verses of Tehillim, Rechava miniyam. Torah is larger than the ocean. There is no limit to the Torah. Our sages said in the Gemara, Divrei Torah, Ashirim hem. The words of Torah are rich. One word brings another, and there is no end. There is practically no end. The Torah is not like every kind of science. Science, you learn it a few years in college, and that's it. The Torah has no end. And that's the reason, by the way, why Torah scholars are known in Hebrew. How do we call them in Hebrew? Talmid Chacham, Talmidei Chachamim. What is the meaning of the word Talmid Chacham? You know, the word Talmid means a student. So how come a big Torah scholar, we refer to him as Talmid Chacham, a student of a scholar? The answer is because there is no end to the Torah. So no one can assume that he knows the whole Torah. So therefore you are only a student of Torah. Since no matter how much you study, the Torah is so vast, so wide, there's no limit. And in every generation you find people who produce more and more from their own mind, but not something that is totally a novelty, but rather something that has to do with what is written. Which means, in every yeshiva, you go to every yeshiva, every head of the yeshiva, his duty is to teach you how to learn in depth, and then your mind becomes very fruitful, and you should see what goes on. I mean, every lecture in the real yeshiva, that's how it goes. You just open your mind, and there is no end. It flows like water, and it does not seem to have any end. Only, we are limited, as far as we are concerned, we are limited only to the actual and simple understanding. Simple understanding. Let me share with you, as you know, I always bring you first words of introduction, which sometimes the introduction itself takes the time of the whole lecture. But I'll share with you what it says in the Talmud, in one of the tractates called Masechet Chagiga, on page 14. And there we read about a very famous story. Arba'a nichnesu lefardes. There were 4 gentlemen who went into a garden. We'll tell you what kind of garden. In the meantime, the Talmud tells us those 4 rabbis went, soon you will see, you will hear their names. They went into the garden. You know what's a garden? A garden has many kinds of fruits, many kinds of plantations, many kinds of things that grow that differ one from another. So we understand that the garden is only a mashal, a parable of the Torah. They went into the garden of Torah, which means they wanted to explore the Torah in all its facets. What are the facets of the Torah? There are 4 facets of the Torah. The first one is known in Hebrew as Peshat. Pshat is the evident, the simple understanding of everything that you read in the Torah. Like for example, we said the first commandment is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, which literally means I am God, your God. Asher hotzi'acha me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you out of Egypt. So we just explained it now according to what we call Pshat. Now remember, the word Pshat, which means the simplistic manner of the Torah, begins with the letter Pe, Peshat, Peshat. So retain in your mind that it begins with the letter Pe. Like Pardes, Pardes, the garden in Hebrew begins with Pe. And then what is the second letter of Pardes? Resh. Resh, very good. Resh is also an acronym for a second facet of the Torah, Remez. Remez in Hebrew means hints. What is it that the Torah, what kind of hint that the Torah is giving me? Which means, besides the simple understanding as it appears, it also hides in it another understanding, another explanation which you could see that it is hinted in the words of that pasuk. That's called remez. Remez by itself is a large ocean of knowledge that is not the simple, the superficial understanding, but rather it's more scientific, it's more hidden, but more something that is derived, of course, from the verse. So remember, we have Pe, Pshat, and we have Resh, of Remez. And then we have, what is the third letter of Pardes? Dalet. And Dalet is an acronym for Drash. What is Drash? You know, in Hebrew, a person who gives you a big sermon is known as a darshan. The word drasha, which means lecture, it means, like it says, Doresh Tov Le'amo in the book of Megillat Esther. Doresh means that he goes beyond the simple understanding. He goes beyond whatever is hinted, but now he himself, the man who talks, produces his own, through his intelligence and knowledge, he produces his own fruits, his own understanding of the same text. And he produces from it things that you didn't think about them in the beginning, and yet after he finishes his lecture, you see that it all fits in the words of this pasuk, of this verse. That's called drasha. Drasha is talking, the knowledge that is condensed in that which we call drasha has no limit. That's why all the rabbis, for example, every Shabbat, they give you a different lecture. They use the same verse, and yet every time, you know, many rabbis, they write books, based on that pasuk, what they said about it in every year of their career as a rabbi. That's called drasha, drush. Lidrosh in Hebrew means to expound into the sea, the ocean of the Torah, in many, many ways, in stories and understandings of the parables, of the riddles of the Torah. We are now left only with one, the last facet of the Torah. And what is the last letter of Pardes, the garden? Samech. And Samech brings with it, is an acronym rather, for another famous facet of the Torah, is known as Sod. Sod is already different. Sod is the realm of the hidden, which means secret. That's the secret part of the Torah. That's where the Kabbalah figures. That's where the book of the Zohar of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai figures. That's the place where for 2,000 years not many understood it, until today, with the advance of science and the advance of Torah, people are suddenly finding out that what's happening is in fact written in the Torah by studying that fourth facet which we call the Sod. The Sod means the secret part of the Torah. That also has no limit. It's also an ocean that practically, I assume that on each one of these facets you could find hundreds of thousands of books that were printed on each one of these facets of Torah. Just to give you an idea how large, how vast is the Torah. So let's go back to that piece of Talmud which we brought from the Masechet Chagiga. So it says that Arba'a nichnesu lefardes. 4 have entered the garden. And that garden, we know it's the garden of Torah. And the Torah does not tell us, the Gemara does not tell us those 4 things that I told you. Only our sages explained later what kind of pardes, what kind of garden are we talking about. We are talking about, and pardes is the word for an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, as we have explained before, which is made up of the word pardes, which means garden in normal Hebrew. And since the Torah is likened to a garden, you know that in a garden you find myriads of kinds. You could find millions of kinds of things that grow, whether it's fruits and plants and seeds. That's what you can find in a real big garden. So the Torah is also, you could find in it everything. In the Torah you could find even the secret of death and life. Only depending on who finds it. Depending how great is the person. For definitely in our generation we cannot find not even one who knows the secret of life and death. But in the times of the sages of the Gemara we find many stories in which we find that they were able to practically revive the dead through incantations that they learned themselves from the Kabbalistical teachings of the Torah. Like for example, Rabbi Yochanan is very famous, knowing that he revived another famous guy by the name of Rav Kahana. He revived him after he died. Some other time we will tell you those stories, but in the meantime, you see that the Torah has in it everything. Everything. In fact, very recently, I saw a DVD of Amnon Yitzchak, Rav Amnon Yitzchak, in which they bring there, it's from Bereshit Aleph and Bereshit Bet. And there you could see many scientists, Jewish scientists, who were not religious, who became religious after they saw the tremendous discoveries that the Talmud is telling us. Today, if there are any discoveries, it's only because there is great equipment. The machines, the telescopes, the things, you could discover the planets as far as only the eye of a telescope can see. But suddenly they realize that the Talmud is talking about that very far star that is called Kima, that is a constellation of 10 stars, and it is the farthest. It will take you about 300 shnot or light years. You know what? Every one light year is at least 3 trillions of miles distance. Imagine. Trillions, not billions and not millions. So imagine And that's one light year. So 300 light years, it's as far from us as even our imagination cannot even reach. And yet our sages discovered 2,000 years ago and more that there is a star called Kima, and they talk about it, and we didn't understand it for such a long time. And now recently, when they discovered that there is such a thing, and they measured that this probably is the limit of the stars, we look back in the Talmud and we see that it's all there. So where did they learn it from? They didn't have any equipment. They didn't have any machinery. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And that's as far as the cosmos is, about the constellations of stars that are beyond us, unless if you have the proper machines, right? Or for example, if you go to the realm of medicine, we know that 150 years ago there was a French doctor by the name Louis Pasteur, and he discovered the how to take care of the rabies. Then many people died from the bite of a sick dog, rabies. Yes, in French it's called la rage, or in Hebrew is kalevet. So many people, millions of people died from that. And then Louis Pasteur found, and it was such a big discovery that even until today, the name of Pasteur, I mean there are many medicinal centers all over the world in the name of Pasteur, the Pasteur Center. Because this guy in France, 150 years ago approximately, he discovered the vaccine for anybody who was affected by a bite of a sick dog. And it was a discovery that was unbelievable. The whole theory of Pasteur, which I am going to explain to you, was found in the Gemara, in Masechet Yoma, one of the big books here. Masechet Yoma, it says, I think it's page 33, I'm not sure, but we can check that later. And there it says a statement that our sages made. By the way, this I heard a long time ago from a professor in the University of Jerusalem, Professor Orbach. That's what I heard from him first. But then later on, when we learned that same Masechet, we discovered this is why they gave so much honor to Pasteur, as though he is the father of this vaccine, but our sages found it very easily. They said, "Kol hanoshech oto kelev shote, ya'achilenu mechatzar kavdo shelo," which means anybody who has been bitten by a crazy dog, here is how you should take care of him, because the poison is extremely virulent, right? So in order to give the treatment is that you take the basis of the liver of the same dog and you give it as a portion to the guy who was affected by the bite. Our sages said that. Now, of course, in terms that do not sound very modern. It's an old-fashioned way how but in fact it's a simple way. And yet this has been discovered, and that's exactly the theory of Pasteur. That you have to take it from the dog himself. I mean, the dog itself, who is the sick one, from him you should take out a piece of his liver and produce the vaccine from the serum from that and administer it to the guy who was affected. And that's only one in thousands of discoveries that have been known to the world only through scientists and things, when they are just very simply written in the Talmud. You go to the realm of agriculture, it defies the imagination how great was their science, how great was their knowledge as to every kind of plant, what it does. If you want to cut a tree, for example, if you go to Masechet Ta'anit on page Kaf He 25, you will see that in case let's say you want to go and buy a tree from someone for the purpose to cut it to have wood for the winter, right, or for cooking or something. So you have to be careful before you cut a tree. You don't just cut a tree, you don't uproot any tree, you have to be very careful. There are laws about it. So, because we want the tree to regenerate, to continue to grow again. What do you do in order to allow it to grow again? If you take it from the roots, depending on the trees, of course, if it is a eucalyptus tree, or a cedar tree, or a sycamore tree, which is the kind of tree that does not produce anymore once you uproot it, it does not regenerate. So automatically, of course, you could even uproot it from the roots. But if it is a tree that produces fruits or produce anything that is like a fruit or something of the kind, then you have to be careful from which part to cut it. You have to leave at least the trunk, depending on what kind of tree it is. The trunk should be about, let's say, 10 centimeters. Or if it is something that has been cut already in the past, then you have to give it a double amount of that type of that measurement. How did they know all this? It's unbelievable. Those things are known only by the experts in this realm, in this domain, today only. And yet it was known by the sages. What I am telling you is only one drop in the biggest ocean.
You also mentioned that the tree, when you cut it, it screams also.
There is such a thing, of course.
Screams.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's already something else. That's the nature of things. But what was that? I mean, how did they learn to know the exact definition of the vernacular of every kind of species, of every kind of the nature of every kind of tree, of every kind of fruit, what it does, what... Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. When it comes to medicine, it's just unbelievable. In fact, the Rambam wrote several books on medicine. One of them, unfortunately, that also I heard from in a big lecture by Professor Orbach in the University of Jerusalem. One of the books of the Rambam was disappeared. We still don't know where it is. And we have many proofs that this book had in it the cure for the cancer and everything. And Professor Orbach said, if we find that book by the Rambam, by Maimonides, that's it. We solve the problem of cancer and everything. You know, the Talmud is talking about a certain book of medicines that was in the time of King Chizkiyahu. You know, King Chizkiyahu was a descendant of David. He was also the father of Menashe, the worst king of Israel, who brought so much Avodah Zarah to Am Israel. But there was a book in the time of Chizkiyahu, the King Chizkiyahu, in which you could find the cures to every single malady, any kind of problem. So much, it was such an extraordinary book that our sages buried it. Why? They buried it. They don't want the people to use it. Because when they started to use it, when they saw how authentic it is, how useful it is, they stopped believing in God. I mean, they didn't resort to pray to God, so automatically they prefer to go to the book and that's it. So they said that's impossible, so therefore they buried the book, which apparently, according to some teachings, it will reappear again when the Mashiach comes. Which means when the Mashiach comes, there will be cures for many kinds of sicknesses that we know today that are practically incurable. So these words of introduction is just to tell you how vast is the Torah. So now going back to the Gemara that I brought you in Masechet Chagiga, where 4 rabbis went into that Pardes, the garden. So it says in the Talmud that only one of them went in peace and came out in peace. And that is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the only one who went into that garden in peace and came out in peace. I will explain. These are the names of the 4 rabbis. The first one was, well, I don't mean to say first in order, but those are the names of those who entered this famous Pardes. One of them is very famous also. We will discuss him. And his name is Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha, the son of Avuya, is very famous in the history of Israel. Anyone who learns Talmud knows about him. Why is he so famous? I'm sorry that you don't know about him, but he is famous. But what made him so famous? Because he became an atheist. And yet he was the teacher of Rabbi Meir, the Tanna, the great sage Rabbi Meir. And Elisha himself, the son of Avuya, was one of the greatest Torah scholars of his generation. But he lost his faith. And I find this subject pertaining because tonight I'm planning to talk about faith, because that's the first commandment. But first let me finish with this. Perhaps it will take longer time. As I told you, my introduction sometimes takes the whole lecture. So first, Elisha ben Avuya. He was affected by going into the garden, into the Pardes. How? So we say that because he lost his faith. I'll discuss him later. The second one was Shimon ben Zoma, known, very famous in Pirkei Avot as Ben Zoma. He was known as the son of Zoma. But his first name is Shimon. He's famous by his statement in Pirkei Avot that says, Ben Zoma Omer, in Pirkei Avot, the book of the fathers, Ben Zoma Omer, Ezehu Chacham, Halomed Mikol Adam. Who is, that's what he said. He says, who is considered wise? A person who is willing to learn from anyone. One who can learn from anyone, that's the wise person. A person who says, I don't need to hear anybody, I know everything, doesn't know anything. So that's the statement of Shimon ben Zoma, and he is one of the 4 rabbis who went into the Pardes. Again, I remind you that the Pardes means garden, but it is only a parable for the story that we are learning, that in fact they went to explore the Torah in its 4 facets. The Pshat, the simple way, the hidden way, the hinted way, as well as the expounding way. But they failed, they were not on the level. Let's assume that this was the case. Not the level because of their scholarship, they were great, tremendous scholars, but perhaps their fear of God was lacking a little. Perhaps there was some kind of defect that caused certain affectations here. Elisha ben Avuya lost his faith later on, not exactly then, but our sages put it there. The second one was Shimon ben Zoma, who lost his mind. The third one was Ben Azai, again the son of Azai. As I will tell you a brief story or description of each one of those rabbis. Good for you to know those things. And we allow ourselves to talk this way, because we don't have too many people tonight. So we can talk freely about little stories and anecdotes. What? So we saw that Elisha lost his faith. Shimon ben Zoma lost his mind. Ben Azai was the third one. He lost his life. He died. And the only one who went in peace and came out in peace, shenichnas beshalom veyatza beshalom, is Rabbi Akiva. So now, a very short and brief description of each one of those. The first one is Elisha ben Avuya. Now listen, open your ears, and try to absorb as much as you can regarding Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha ben Avuya was a very great man. Our sages tell us that probably in the very beginning of his life, when he was very young, he allowed himself with this. He went to school, of course, and he learned the Torah like everyone else. But his father was rich, and they were more modern. At the time, the wisdom of Aristotle and the science of the Greeks went in the minds of many people. So Elisha ben Avuya allowed himself also to have some magazines, or some, of course, in a way, according to their times, that have to do with this, with science or philosophy that is foreign philosophies. And because of that, so even though he gave great attention to the Torah, and since he was a big genius, he was a tremendous Torah scholar and he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir. Imagine, you know who's Rabbi Meir? I'll tell you just one word about Rabbi Meir. Let's go further, another 150 years later. We are now in that period of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the famed rabbi who was the last of the period of the sages of the Mishnah. That's about 2,000 years ago. And he's the one who was the richest rabbi in his time, and he was able to pay all the rabbis to come and bring all the Mishnayot and all the Braitot, all the teachings that they had and the tradition, to put them together in the book that we call the Mishnah. He is the one who practically wrote for us the whole Mishnah. Without Mishnah there is no Jewish people. You have to know that. Without Mishnah we cannot exist. And then the Mishnah, of course, produced the era. Once the era of the Mishnah ended, started the era of the Talmud, of the Gemara. Those are the discussions regarding every law in the Mishnah. That's when you see how the Torah is vast, and that's what we call Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral Torah. As you know, we have two Torahs. We have the written Torah and we have the oral Torah. You have to know that you have to believe in both. If you believe only in one, you don't believe in anyone. Like, for example, the Reform movements, they believe only in the written Torah, and that's the reason why they don't even observe, not even the written Torah. Because the written Torah says you have to keep Shabbat. The Reform do not keep Shabbat. How come? You say that you believe in the written Torah. You don't believe in the oral Torah, okay? But you understand that anyone who did not believe in the oral Torah ended up by not believing also in the written Torah, which is the original Torah. And that's what happened 2,000 years ago with I don't know if you learn Jewish history, that the Jewish people was made of three factions. The largest faction was the 90% of the Jewish people was made of the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the 90% of the Jewish people that were Orthodox and good people and everything. And then about 9% was the Sadducees, Tzdukim in Hebrew. The Sadducees were the rich people, and those people who apparently went to Greek schools and they learned not to believe in the rabbinical traditions and the rabbinical explanations. So they said we don't believe in the oral Torah, which means we don't believe in the revival of the dead, the resurrection of the dead, and we don't believe also in Olam Haba, in the world to come. So what happened to those Sadducees? Even though they were very powerful, even though they were only 9%, but this was a very powerful group, but they ended up becoming all Christians at the time of 2,000 years ago, and you know who came. And finally, only 1% pertains to one faction of Judaism that was known in then. Not today. Today there's no such a thing. But then there was a small group called the Essenis, Isiyim. Those were the people who believed that absolutely nothing to enjoy and to benefit from this world, just to go and live in caves and to live only with water and bread and nothing else. Those people also ended up to disappear, because the Torah doesn't go this way. The Torah goes, enjoy yourself and do everything, only do it the right way. That's all. Do it the kosher way. That's the motto of the Torah. So Elisha was the son of this kind of family. Well, I don't know if they were Sadducees then, but Elisha, he grew in a family, powerful people, rich people, who also motivated by Torah, they sent him to schools of Torah, and he became a tremendous scholar, but he allowed himself when he was young to also take with him, together with the books of Torah, he took also a few books of Greek philosophies. Today it's not a big problem, because today our mind is not so large. But then, this affected him very much. Affected him not immediately. He grew up to be a great rabbi. He was even the teacher in the academies. And I told you about Rabbi Meir, his disciple, and I forgot to continue about Rabbi Meir. I told you if you go later, 150 years later, to go to the time of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the famed rich rabbi who unified all the rabbis in writing the Mishnah, he was the he himself said, and he was considered to be the greatest Torah scholar of his time, and he himself said, the only reason why I became so great is because I saw the back of Rabbi Meir. If I had the privilege to see his face, I would be much greater. So imagine how great was Rabbi Meir himself, how great he was. And Rabbi Meir was the disciple of Elisha ben Avuya, the guy who lost his faith. In fact, there are fascinating stories about him and Rabbi Meir. For example, after he became an atheist, so the sages did not refer to him anymore by the name Elisha ben Avuya, Elisha the son of Avuya. They refer to him by the term Elisha Acher. Anybody who has any kind of learning in Talmud knows this very well. Elisha Acher, the other Elisha. Because once he became an atheist, he became the other. So this man, he gave us a lot of tzarut. He gave us, after he became an atheist, he gave the Jewish people a lot of problems. Towards the end of his life, when he was about to die, so he was, a few days before he died, he was very sick in his deathbed. But before that was a certain Shabbat. And suddenly they came out from the yeshiva and they realized that Elisha Acher, by now he's known as the other Elisha, but they saw him riding a donkey, which is definitely forbidden in Jewish law on Shabbat, to ride a donkey, mechamer. But they saw him riding, which is a declaration of defiance, yeah? You understand that means he doesn't care about the Torah. So they wanted to do something, and Rabbi Meir was among the rabbis there, and he says, please, he was my Rebbe. I'm going to go and Rabbi Meir joined him. Now imagine the picture. Rabbi Meir, it's Shabbat. Rabbi Meir is walking, and Elisha riding his donkey. All right, you see the picture? And what does he want now, Rabbi Meir? He wants to learn more Torah. Imagine, the guy lost his faith. He's an atheist, but he still has tremendous knowledge. And which reminds me of another case that I had. I don't know if I told you this story that happened to me in Dill, New Jersey. No, I didn't tell you? About approximately 15 years ago, was that? Yeah, it was about 15 years ago. No, more. 18 years ago. When I was invited by the community of Dill, the rich Syrian Jews, they wanted me to be their chazan. Don't say that. They wanted me to be their chazan. But I was then the rabbi of Co-op City. I was the rabbi of Co-op City.
In the Bronx, right?
In the Bronx, yes. 14 years I was the rabbi the city of the Sephardi community of Co-op City. And of course, going to the Syrians means that you're going to be rich. They said to me, they offered so many things, no question about it. I was curious. I didn't have any intention to leave my community in Co-op City, but I said, let me go. I'm invited. Let me go there for one Shabbat. I wanted to see the very rich, the beautiful place. You never went to Dill? You try it. It's in New Jersey. It's about 2 hours from here. The most beautiful houses you have ever seen. Every house is $2 million, $4 million, $5 million house. Something unbelievable. And the Syrian Jews, they live there. Each one of them is very rich. God bless them. So when I went there was only one synagogue, the synagogue of Rabbi Dweck. Today they have more than 20 synagogues. They are very religious and good and very rich, no question about it. So when I was there, they wanted me to be, even though they knew I am a rabbi, but they have already a rabbi, they wanted me to be the chazan. You know, Malkiel, I am a good chazan, remember? They hear me on the radio every day in Israel, every day.
You're going to say something?
No, that's all I need now. Anyway, so when I went, something unbelievable happened to me when I was there that Shabbat. On that Shabbat, I was invited, so they invited all the community to come and hear me. And I said, what the heck, let me go. So I went there, and I was invited to lead the services. I led, and the Friday night, there was also another guest, Rabbi Ades, a very famous Torah scholar from Israel, from Jerusalem, from Bnei Brak, Rabbi David Ades. And he was there also. He said to me, I don't believe they will hire you because You have to be an expert in the makamim, in the models, the musical, Oriental music. I told him, well, you don't know me, what can I do? We'll see. So the next day, when I had to wake up in the morning and to lead the services, in the middle of the night I couldn't sleep. Why? Because the guy was snoring. We were in the same room, me and Rabbi Ades, and Rabbi Ades was snoring like you have never heard such a thing. It's unbelievable. I cannot describe how much he snored, because you could get used to even a train going near you, but he will never get used to the snoring of Rabbi Ades. God bless him. Every minute I would wake him up. Rabbi David, please, have mercy. He said, I'm sorry. Okay, quick, no problem. 1 minute later, he goes back again to a different... And it's unbelievable. If I don't sleep, I cannot sing. In the morning, my voice will not be good. But Baruch Hashem, so I woke up, I went out of the room at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is the reason why I told you the story. Because we had another guest with us. Another guy who appeared to be a young man, a tremendous Torah scholar. And he sat with us in the table, and I was amazed to see his knowledge in the most difficult areas of Torah, the Eruvin. It's a long story. I couldn't believe it, but I thought, well, possible. In the middle of the night when I got out from the room, unable to sleep, I saw downstairs that somebody is downstairs. There was light and somebody. I went down a little and I see a table full of books, big books of the Torah, and somebody is learning all night without a kippah. His head was completely uncovered. I couldn't believe it. What's going on? I was embarrassed. I went back to the room. Somehow Hashem made a miracle that I was able to sleep a little. In the morning, thank God, it was a tremendous success. Even Rabbi Ades himself came down and he says, I never heard such a thing. Of course they would love to have you and everything. Okay, I did 11 tracks of music, which the Syrian love. So, and in the afternoon, I was invited to give a shiur in Rambam. That's where they saw also that I... And they were so sure, the Syrian Jews, because they are so rich, they are sure that you will accept their offer. But in the meantime, I asked Rabbi Duet. I said, Rabbi, you know what I saw in the middle of the night? The guest that we had last night, and he's studying all night Torah without covering his head. He says, oh, that's a known. He's my cousin. And Mr. Asses. He's a professor in the Hebrew Union College of the Reform Movement in Cincinnati. And he knows the whole Talmud by heart. But he's an atheist. Unbelievable. By the way, I heard, some time ago I heard that he became religious. But I took him back to Brooklyn in my car, I remember. And the guy, an atheist, a declared atheist, and yet all the knowledge of Torah was in his head. Unbelievable, a genius. So that's what happened to, let's go back to Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha, they start calling him Elisha ben Avuya, they called him Elisha Acher. One day, after he finished with our religion and everything, he went on Shabbat riding on his donkey, which was a terrible desecration of Shabbat. So the people were alarmed. So Rabbi Meir, his disciple Rabbi Meir, said, take it easy, I'm going to talk to him. He went with him and he walked with him for a mile or so. And all that time he was trying to absorb more knowledge. And Elisha was teaching him while doing the desecration of Shabbat, riding the donkey, and probably with his head not covered and everything, but he was giving him his knowledge. And Rabbi Meir was absorbing. When they asked Rabbi Meir, how can you learn from a man like this? By the way, today we have to be careful learning something from people who are not believers. Like, for example, you have in the universities, in colleges, you have some professors who know Talmud, professor of Talmud, but they are not religious at all. You have to be very careful. Don't take any. I'm just telling you as an example that it could affect extraordinarily the mind, because they come up with their own versions and things like this. But Rabbi Meir was already a great man. So when they asked him, how can you learn from him? So he said the famous statement, Tochok achal klipato zarak. I eat the inside and I throw the shell. That's what he said. That this statement has become famous in many, we use it in many other cases. So you see that he did want to absorb the knowledge of the man. Why? Because he was not afraid to be affected, because Rabbi Meir was already on such a level that nothing can affect him, and that's why he was allowed, but we are not allowed. In the last days of his life, Elisha, when he was about to die, he didn't do any teshuvah. He did not say, I am repenting. No. But then, because listen, when you learn Torah from someone, you owe him respect, even no matter how badly he became. So Rabbi Meir came to see him in the last few hours of his life. So the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Meir asked him, Rebbe, won't you do tshuva now? Please, would you like to? I'll help you to say I'm sorry for what I did. Maybe something will be accepted. Who knows? And Elisha said to him, no. Just a few minutes before he died. He said, no, because I did hear that in heaven they said, everyone is accepted except Elisha. Chutz mi acher, except the other, acher. Of course, this is, the commentators explained that this was sort of understanding that he exaggerated so much that it does not deserve to be forgiven. You know, sometimes people, they do feel that they don't bother making changes because they know they have exaggerated so much. So what is there to change? Anyway, nothing is going to change anything. So they say that's a big mistake, by the way. Because no matter how bad we become, there's always the possibility to change. And to be accepted, that God will say it's okay. Ki yado peshuta lekabel shavim. His hand, the God's hands, is always outstretched to receive those who are willing to change and come back and to amend their ways. But Elisha Acher understood that in accordance with his level and everything, he did exaggerate, that he denied the Torah when he himself was a master of Torah. How can you deny the Torah? It's sometimes from great knowledge you could come to this, but depending on how you grew up. Our sages explained that what caused Elisha Acher to lose his faith? Because in his early childhood, he used to take with him to school a few more papers and magazines that have to do with Greek wisdom and philosophies. That affected his mind, not immediately, but only later. They say he saw something that made him felt disappointed, and he says, is this the Torah and the reward that you expect? So therefore he forsook everything. But you have to know one thing. So when Rabbi Meir asked him at the last minute of his life, Rebbe, won't you come back? He says, no, I just saw in heaven that they said everyone is accepted except Acher, except him. And then he passed away. But Rabbi Meir exclaimed, saying, Kimdumani she Rabbi asa tshuva. Rabbi Meir said, I think that even though he died without saying it, but I think I detected in him a will to do teshuvah. He wanted, in other words, he regretted. He understood. That's what happens usually with everybody. Only problem sometimes pride does not let you feel free to do what you feel you want to do. Then the Gemara tells us that later on, when he was buried, there was a pillar of fire coming out of his grave. So Rabbi Meir prayed, and the pillar of fire became only smoke. For at least 150 years, a pillar of smoke came out from the grave of, which means he was being judged in Gehinnom, in hell. 150 years later came the great sage Rabbi Yochanan. Not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, but Rabbi Yochanan, the chief rabbi of Eretz Israel then. Talking about 1900 years ago. And when he came, he visited the grave of Elisha, the other, so he saw the smoke of, the pillar of smoke. And he said, Rabbi Yochanan said, he said, wow, if I was there 150 years ago, if this was my Rebbe, I would have saved him, even from the pillar of smoke. Did you understand what I just said? You didn't pay attention.
How would he say it?
Rabbi Yochanan said, which means he is blaming Rabbi Meir, who lived 150 years before Rabbi Yochanan. How come weren't you able to save your Rebbe? You could have saved him. You are a great man. You could have saved him. I mean, from hell. Because if the smoke, even though he saved him enough by replacing the smoke of fire by a pillar of smoke, right? But was not enough. So Rabbi Yochanan says, if I was there at the time, and if he was my Rebbe, I would have succeeded to practically save him entirely in heaven. This is only just a little. So that's the first rabbi who went into the Pardes. So you will have to call this lecture Arba'a nichnesu lefardes. 4 went into the Pardes. Remember, many people will understand. That should be the title because we learned it at length. The second rabbi was Shimon ben Zoma. Shimon ben Zoma, a great sage. If he was not a great sage, his words wouldn't be recorded in the book of the fathers. In Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma Omer, Ezehu Chacham Alomed Mikol Adam. Not only that, I'll give you, I just remembered now another proof that he was really a great sage. If you roll back with me to the Talmud of Masechet Brachot in the last chapter, it says, listen to this, Zohar. In the last chapter it says, if somebody has dreams, one day we will talk about dreams. There is much to say about that. But there is a chapter at the end, the 9th chapter of Masechet Brachot. Most of the chapter is dealing with dreams. Haro'eh. That's why the name of the chapter is called Haro'eh. If you see in the dream this or that, what does it mean? What is the interpretation? It's a big chapter. And one of them, it says like this, Haro'eh ben Zoma b'chalom yetzapeh lechochma. If you see Ben Zoma in the dream, in the dream we could see anything. I mean, we cannot see Eliyahu and Navi, but in the dream you could have Eliyahu. You could see somebody and you think in the dream that he is Eliyahu. The same thing also. Let's say you studied the teachings of Ben Zoma. In the night you might, not the same night, because if it is the same night then it's not, it doesn't count. Yeah, we don't know how he looks like. But let's say in the dream you think, who is this guy? Oh, that's Ben Zoma. Everything is possible in the dream. If you dream Ben Zoma in the dream, then what is the interpretation? Anticipate that you will become a sage. You will become a wise man. So isn't this a clear-cut proof that Ben Zoma was the example of Chokhmah? So you see, I was correct. I just remembered it. So that same Ben Zoma, whose first name was Shimon, he was the second rabbi who went to the Pardes. Again, what is the Pardes? Going into the garden of Torah, exploring and studying the Torah according to its 4 facets. It's not easy for the mind. We should be content if we learn only according to one facet. But they wanted to explore all the 4 ones. That caused a certain tribulation to their mind. So the first one was affected by the fact that his mind became affected, and therefore he lost his faith. Whether directly or indirectly, that is up to the commentators to say. The second one lost his mind. Shimon ben Zoma lost his mind. Unfortunately, that's all I have in my mind to tell you about Shimon ben Zoma. That's all. He lost his mind. The third one was Ben Azai. Ben Azai was a spectacular Rav. First you have to know why we don't call him Rabbi Ben Azai, like all the rabbis in his time, like Rabbi Akiva was in his time. In fact, he was his friend Rabbi. That's Rabbi Akiva. But Ben Azai is known only by the term Ben Azai. Why? Some say because he didn't have the time to go and for the exams of rabbinical studies. And he never became a rabbi. He was only he was the greatest scholar of his generation. I'll prove it to you. He himself said once, as stated in the Talmud of Masechet Bechorot on page 68, I think. And there it says that he himself said, Kol Chachmei Yisrael ki klipat hashum lefanai, chutz me'akereach hazeh. All the sages of Israel are like a shell of garlic compared to me, except for the bald one. The bald one was Rabbi Akiva. He was bald. So of course you could always protest and argue, how can anybody say this about himself? Why, that's not nice. But when we are talking about very, very big and exceptional people, it's not considered haughtiness, it's not considered conceit. It's something that was the truth. Nobody could compete with him except Rabbi Akiva. In fact, I'll give you another proof. If you go to Masechet Kiddushin, because I cannot remember exactly the page, I will tell you that this is in the 3rd chapter. And there it says, "Ha'omer le'isha hari'at mikudeshet li al menat she'ani talmid chacham." I told you this once before. If somebody says to a woman, I want to marry you, I have no money to give you, I have no ring, but I want you to know that I want you to become my wife based on the fact that I am a Torah scholar. In the old times, there was such a possibility that the woman, if she feels honored by being married to someone of a high level, then he doesn't have to give a ring. She is automatically married to him through the honor that she feels, through the pleasure and enjoyment that she feels. Not today, by the way. This is not for the last 1,000 years at least. Definitely, it is not accepted. But in the old time, there was such a thing, mekadesh bahana'a. It says if you are telling a wife, be my wife based on a certain pleasure that I give you, such as if I am a very important man, and so forth. You know, when somebody is very important, that's by the way, relating to this parasha of this week, it says, V'khuli teruma. What is li? God says, take for me. Well, he doesn't need the money. So what's for me? So we explained that when we give in the name of God and he is willing to accept, that's considered a very big gift that he gives us. Let's say you give a gift to a king. If the king accepts from you the gift, you are very happy. Oh, he accepted my gift, so you are willing to pay, so he will accept your gift. So the same, that's why it says in the Torah this week, Vaykhuli, that God says, take for me. What do you mean for me? Everything is yours. The answer is that if he is willing to take from us, that it's like he gave us. You understand? So that's why it says lishmi. Anyway, this is only by the way. So we are talking about Ben Azai, the 3rd rabbi. And this man was a tremendous scholar. Nobody was able to compete with his tremendous... as I told you, if somebody says to a woman, I want you to become married to me, because I am a Torah scholar, she is married to him. Even if later on they found out he is not a very big scholar. All he knows is a little... One booklet called Masechet Derech Eretz, Masechet Kala, that's all. It's enough, because at that time the mind of the woman was made on that, therefore it's enough to make the acquisition. It's not easy, it's an easy thing to explain. But in the meantime, the sages say in the Talmud there, in Masechet Kiddushin, they say, even if he says, I want you to be married to me based on my knowledge, he doesn't. So the Gemara says, he doesn't have to have the knowledge of Ben Azai. אינו צריך להיות תלמיד חכם כבן Azai. So if the Talmud is using Ben Azai just as an example of the epitome of wisdom, so you know who was Ben Azai. He's the famous Rabbi. Rabbi was a famous teacher who taught the people that they should get married. He says, "Kol mi she'eno osek bepirya verivya, harei hu shofech damim." Check this in Masechet Evamot on page 63. And he's teaching a big lecture about the importance of getting married and bringing children to the world. And he himself was not married. So the disciple said to him, Rabbi, na'e doresh velo na'e mekayem. You talk nice, but you don't do well. You tell us to get married and bring children when you yourself you couldn't. So he said to them, that's a famous statement that only he was able to make and nobody else is allowed to make. Ma e'aseh shenafshi chashka b'Torah. What can I do, he said. My soul longs only for Torah knowledge. Which means I cannot give love to a woman or to anything in life. I did explain this once, that love and affection is divided in several parts. There is love for the world, to see the world, to travel. People have passion for traveling. That's one kind of love. There is love for food. There are people who are crazy about food. Not me, believe me. I don't care about it. But just in case you get something in your mind. But I want you to know that there are people who, for them, the passion for food is the greatest. And there is passion for women, no question about it. For love. But there is also the passion for Torah. We fall in love with Torah. The Torah is something for which to be infatuated. I don't ask you now to have to study it many years in order to see how much we fall in love with Torah. Torah is something formidable. Formidable. So everybody has his love. The concept of love by him is divided in many kinds of love. Everybody wants to do this, wants to do that. He loves this, he loves that. He has a passion for this, he has a passion for that. But it's very difficult to find someone who has no passions at all except one. But Ben Azai, in his statement, is revealing to his disciples, what can I do? It's beyond me. Nafshi chashka b'Torah. My soul has only one passion, Torah. Therefore I am unable to marry. Like there is another Gemara that says, if somebody is studying, can he get married? So the Talmud assumes to say maybe it's not good. Why? He's taking a wife and now, which is a burden on his shoulders, and now he's going to learn. You have to work. That's a certain declaration in the Talmud. Some read it this way. So what? That depends already. Today it's very possible because they pay. Even the people who learn, they get paid. So it's like work. But in the old time, you learn, you didn't get paid. So how are you going to feed the family? So very few did it. Like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. As the Talmud tells us, those who follow the system of Rabbi Shimon learn Torah and have faith in God. Those who followed him did not succeed. But the other opinion of Rabbi Ishmael, who says, no, you have to work and you have to learn. Both of them. Those who followed Rabbi Ishmael succeeded. Does that mean that Rabbi Shimon is not correct? No. It's just that not for everybody. Only a small minority can do that. Many people have done it and they succeeded. But if everybody is going to do it, if you don't have the emunah, the faith of those who learn, and having a total emunah, which is the subject what should be tonight. We were supposed to talk about emunah, about faith. So if you have real faith in you, You'll be surprised how many miracles God will do for you. Maybe I will conclude with one little story. This way we will say we have at least dealt with some kind of emunah, with faith. But remind me to come back to it. So Ben Azai was the third guy. He didn't get married. There is a certain opinion that he got married later on with the daughter of Rabbi Akiva, and then he passed away, or she passed away. We're not sure about that. But in the meantime, when he was teaching, he was not married. So he said something that nobody else can say, according to what it says in Even Ezer, in the book of law, Jewish law. It says that if anybody wants thinks that he can be like Ben Azai, forget it. Nobody can be like Ben Azai. And yet when he went into the Pardes, remember the Pardes? The garden? He lost his life. Can you suggest why would a giant like this lose his life? Why did he lose his life when he went into such pressure of mind? Let's call it this way. The mind has been extraordinarily pressured by learning 4 facets of Torah. You know, the exploration of Torah in 4 ways, including the secret way, the Kabbalah. So he lost, the first one lost his life, the first one lost his faith, the second one lost his mind, the third one, Ben Azai, lost his life. Because the pressure was just too much to take. It's possible to say that I'm going to engage myself in telling you something that perhaps is correct, because I think I saw it written somewhere. When a person is not married, no matter how great he will become, he will always be lacking something. He will always be lacking something in his system that will fail him when the time comes. Ben Azai, for example, he was the greatest scholar of his generation, but he was not married. Not being married and going into the garden, which means learning Kabbalah when you are not married. Today they do that, by the way. They do that, it's a big violation. You know, there are some rabbis, there are doctors, philosophers and rabbis and Kabbalists. You could see it in the internet. And other rabbis, known even here in New York and in Los Angeles, the Kabbalah Center. And they teach Kabbalah to everyone, including non-Jews. Whereas the Talmud is very open about it and says you cannot learn Kabbalah until you are at least 40 of age, and only after you have filled up your stomach with Torah, with open Torah, which means you know the whole Shas, the whole Gemara. Then you allow yourself to learn Kabbalah. When I called my mechutan is Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, the most famous Kabbalist of this age, of this generation. He's the Rosh Yeshiva of Ahavat Shalom. My daughter is married to his son. So I asked him a few years ago, I called him, it was at midnight. And I called him, what is the chance that I have to learn Kabbalah? I have the desire to learn Kabbalah. I do learn a little. But I wanted to have it really professionally. And only by him, because he is the head of the Academy of Kabbalah in Jerusalem. So I said to him, what are the chances that I can have to learn Kabbalah? He said to me, all right, you can. Why not? You have enough knowledge to go into Kabbalah. But you have to know that it's a cycle of 16 years. You have to start the cycle. First, I have to wait for the cycle to conclude that they have. I cannot start in the middle. And then start the cycle that will take 16 years. It was too much for me, so I left it. I do read, sometimes I do try to absorb a few concepts of Kabbalah. I even taught a course of Kabbalah, not Kabbalah, but about Kabbalah, 6 months that I did a few years ago in Forest Hills. But to go into Kabbalah in the level of Ben Azai and the level of those rabbis, that's practically unbelievable. Kabbalah is not something easy. You have to go, you learn about the secrets of the universe. The real Kabbalists tell you that the only way for you to become a Kabbalist, you have to purify your body with fasting and the total purification. You have to be completely pure of any negative things. Who can testify on himself such a thing? I can't. And yet today, there are some rabbis who teach Kabbalah even to Madonna.
Yeah.
Imagine what kind of Kabbalah she has been absorbing. Very nice. But real Kabbalah is something very serious, and it takes a lot, not only of knowledge, but it has to do first with the total discipline of the body. You have to be in total control of your body. Can anybody be in control of his body between you and me? Whatever your body wants, you go after him like a little slave. Don't you know that? But to be in total control of your body, that's number one. And of course, plus the knowledge. Then you could learn Kabbalah. So, and they make out of Kabbalah a joke. There's another guy in the internet, Rabbi Leitner or something like this. My God, what he does, this guy is a desecration of the first degree. I never saw such a thing.
All of the people in Vienna and
the whole world is going with this rabbi. All the non-Jews in Brazil, in everywhere, they have conventions and things like this. What a joke. Unfortunately, Ben Azai, who went into this with the proper preparation, he lost his life. Now, losing the mind, I can understand, because the pressure of the Kabbalah as well as the other studies were too much on the mind. Maybe he lost his mind because of that. But Ben Azai did not lose his mind. He lost his life. Perhaps because he saw things for which he was not prepared. Because they saw things. They saw tremendous things. Are you capable of seeing things that perhaps you can't see? Are we supposed to see? Can we see the face of God? We discussed this last time. We says, Ki lo yar'ani ha'adam v'chai. Nobody can see the face of God unless if you die. After we die, then we see the face of God. I did tell you last time that how do we die? When the neshama sees the face of God. That's how she departs from the body. Otherwise, she has no right to leave the body at all, even though she can leave any time, because the body is full of holes. Remember? Chalulim, chalulim. And yet, as soon as God appears, she says, "Here I am." She goes immediately like a missile, like a magnet to him, because we are all an extraction of God himself. What happened to Ben Azai? He went into the realm of real Kabbalah, with all the gigantic knowledge that he had, because he was not well prepared with the proper obligations of every Jew to get married. He was not well prepared, so he lost his life. The pressure was too much. You know, take a wife that makes you finally complete. Without a wife, you are half a body. Our sages said that. Palga de gufa. When somebody is not married, he's considered half a body. After you get married, then you are one. So going to learn Kabbalah when you are half is definitely not suggestible, not advisable to anybody. Finally, Rabbi Akiva was the only one, the fourth rabbi, who was able to go in and came out in total sanity, safe and healthy. He's the only one. Throughout the Talmud we see the genius of Rabbi Akiva that has absolutely impossible to describe easily. Everybody knows the story of Rabbi Akiva. I told you the story of Rabbi Akiva, how he became what he became. When he was 40, he didn't know anything. And yet, because of the love between him and Rachel, the daughter of the richest man of Jerusalem, Kalba Sabua, and she promised him to marry him if he goes to learn. And he left everything and he went like a little child to learn. For 7 years he did not open his mouth. And only later he became it, because he was a genius. And later, after 24 years that he spent in the yeshiva, he came out surrounded with 24,000 students. And the name of Rabbi Akiva was all over the Jewish houses, all over the world. Everyone was dreaming just to look at him, to see him. And yet he was the son of converts. He was the son of people who converted to Judaism.
He wasn't Jewish? He was.
His father was a convert.
His father?
Yeah, his father. His father was a convert. Ben Gerim. To teach us that even from the Gerim, from convert, you could have the most important people like Ruth. She's our mother. And yet she came from Moab. And we had several. So you see. But I promised you I will conclude the lecture by telling you a little story about faith. Again, I open this Gemara, not using it. You probably think by now that this is a game, right? I prepared, even here it is. The story of Rabbi Hanina that we learn together. Every night I have a lecture that I give in the Gemara. I wanted to use the story of Rabbi Hanina, the wife of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, how she was baking nothing, because she had nothing to bake, but she wanted to, she was embarrassed that the neighbors will see that she has nothing. So she was baking cloth. And then when the neighbor, a bad neighbor came in, she wanted to see, what is she doing? We know she has nothing. And she comes in. In the meantime, the wife of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa disappeared out of embarrassment. And a miracle happened that when the woman came and she saw the most beautiful dough and bread that is being baked, and she started to holler, Madam, come on, where are you? Your bread is being burning. And she came out and she said, why did it? Yeah, I know, I went to fetch a shovel by which to pick up the bread. So a miracle. Why miracles happen to only people who have, it's not faith. We discussed last week what is the meaning of faith, strength. That means no fluctuations. Whether bad or good, you always have faith in God. That is, if you prove yourself to have this kind of faith, that even in hard times, because God gives us hard times for a purpose. By the way, hard times and hardship make us better. We become better because of troubles. If there was no troubles, people would be eating each other. One would swallow the other, mamash. But God gives suffering, and suffering makes us more delicate in nature and more humble and better people. I'm not inviting suffering. God forbid, I don't want any suffering to fall on me or anybody. But if it comes, you should know that one should learn to accept, because God loves him and he wants him to be better. Many times suffering opens the eyes. Many times because of suffering you wake up. We can sleep in the world. If nothing happens, our sages say in the Talmud, in the Gemara, in Masechet Brachot, it says that if one saw that he didn't suffer for 40 days, not even a headache, not even a toothache, you should worry that perhaps he has nothing to do in the world to come. Maybe they will reject him. Ask me if what I am saying is bothering you. Again, if someone sees that he is fine, 40 days without the slightest suffering, he should be worried that maybe he lost his world. From this we know that if suffering comes upon people, it's only so that we can earn what we have. And our sages says, what do you call suffering? I mean, there is a maximum of suffering that cannot be described, and there is a minimum. What is the minimum of suffering? So the Talmud tells us in Masechet Eruvin that if you are looking for your key in your right pocket of the right pants, and you cannot find it there, and you have to go to the left one, that's also called suffering. See? I know a guy, he's a wonderful man. I know him, when he cannot find something, he doesn't bother to look in the other side. When I said to him, why didn't you look in the other side? He said, I can't, I'm too lazy. He said. I can't. Which means it's also suffering of some kind. So let me tell you a story about emunah. Faith. We told you that faith is like the word emunah, like it says in the book of the Torah, in Parashat Beshalach, in the story of Amalek. It says, "Vayhi yadav emunah ad bo hashamesh." Moshe Rabbeinu raised his hands and they stood steady. They were steady without moving. He didn't bring them down. And all that time the Jewish people was winning against Amalek. So the word emunah shows steadiness. No, you don't weaken. And God wants to test us. He tests us. Don't you think that if I have faith, that means that God is going to give me everything I want? Because then what kind of faith is this? Faith is supposed to be faith only when you don't get what you want. And yet you retain your faith, that's faith. And yet there are many levels on faith. How many people, you ask them, do you have faith? They say, of course I have faith. You believe in God? Of course I believe in God. And then the next day something happens. Oh, the last thing in their mind is God. That's not emunah. Emunah means all the time to adhere to the concept of emunah in your heart without any fluctuations. I was present with one of my teachers, the one who ordained me, first one, Rabbi Nissim Azran, in the Academy of Bet Shmuel in Jerusalem. His name is Rabbi Nissim Azran. He passed away a few years ago. He was the head of the Academy of Bet Shmuel, where I learned a few years. And he told me personally this story. His father was one of the biggest rabbis of Jerusalem, was Av Beddin, was a judge in Jerusalem. And his father told him the following story. So this happened approximately 60 or 70 years ago. It happened in Jerusalem, in the section of Machane Yehuda. If you ever visited Jerusalem, you probably went also to the marketplace. And the marketplace, who wouldn't know Machane Yehuda, where everything is there. Everything that is born in the world is there. In that section there are old houses. Not inside, but outside the market there are old houses. And people who were several generations in Israel, not modern Israel, but even before, they lived in Jerusalem from the ancient Yishuv, many Sephardic Jews also. One of them was an old woman, very poor and very old. But even though she didn't know how to read, how to write, but she has tremendous faith. She was very, very pious. And one day she went for checkup and they found out that she has cancer. And the doctors told her that she has only 6 months to live. Lo alaychem velo alenu. He couldn't see on her face any anxiety, because she said, all right, that's what the doctors say. Now I know what to do. I'm going to my rabbi. She has faith that her rabbi is going to come up with a solution. I don't know yet the rabbi who can come up with a solution for cancer. But she had faith. She went to the rabbi, to the father of my teacher, Rabbi Nissim Azran, Rabbi Shmuel Azran. I mean, the name of the academy is on his name, Bet Shmuel, the house of Shmuel. And he is a modern man, big Torah scholar, but a very modern. The English were in control of the Holy Land then. And she came to him, Rabbi, the doctors told me so and so, so I came to you. So he said to her, you came to me? What can I do? If the doctors already proclaimed your diagnosis, what can I do? She said, what do you mean, what can you do? I came to you for, to give me the cure. There's no discussion here. Give me the cure. The rabbi, he saw in her such faith, he didn't know what to do. So the first thing that came to his mind was to ask her a question. What fruit do you like most? Of course, in his mind, he had the intention to tell her, listen, since you are going to die, so at least enjoy yourself with the kind of fruit that you love most. She said to him, I love watermelon. Watermelon. He said to her, well, go tomorrow and buy all the watermelon you can, full truckloads, and eat watermelon till you croak. She took his advice like if it came from Moshe Rabbeinu. The next day she ordered truckloads of watermelon and she started to eat and eat and eat. That's all she ate.
A whole day?
Every whole day and until she, what can I tell you? 2 months later she went for a checkup to see how it progresses, the tumor, how the tumor progresses. The first doctor who used to take care of her, he did the x-rays, he fainted. He says, I don't see the tumor. It's impossible. Something probably is wrong with his eyes. He called the other doctor. And the second doctor even fainted. He says, where is the tumor? She was as large as can be, and now she's not there at all. After a few deliberations between them, they realized that the woman is healthy. So she went, the results show that she has no tumor. They went to her and they said, Madam, you're healthy. You're well. She said, I know. I went to the rabbi. I know.
The rabbi was.
Now, this is a story. It's a true story. How can we explain this in modern time like today? How? There's only one way. Her faith was the kind of faith, she was lucky to have faith like this. Because nobody has today. Where can you find faith like this? But this was a faith of an innocent soul. A soul that is extremely pious without knowing too much. All she knew is believe in God and the rabbis who represent him. That's all. She had such full faith without an iota of doubt. That's the secret. All of us we believe, but there is always some doubt here and there. We are not so sure. But she was very sure. According to certain books, that kind of faith which is 100% strong, without anything lacking, produce an energy in the body almost atomic. And it can practically destroy anything that is against the system of the body. And that's what happened. One day I spoke with a big doctor here in more than 30 years ago when I spoke with Dr. Abitbol in Jamaica Hospital. And they told me we were good friends, so I told him this. He says, it's unbelievable. But I just read, he said to me, I just read that watermelon is full so much with potassium, and the great quantity of potassium can do miracles against cancer. Go ahead, take the information. Use it for somebody who, if you know someone who knows, maybe, I don't know. All I know is one thing. What made it for this woman is emunah, which means Anochi Hashem Elokecha. When God says, I am God, your God, the Rambam Maimonides writes in the book of Sefer HaMitzvot, Zohi mitzvat ha'emunah, shechayav le'amin she'akadosh baruch hu chai v'kayam. That one has to believe. From the first commandment we learn that you have to believe that there is, that the God, our God, to believe him like if you see him. You see him or not, it's the same. Of course I'm telling you, I don't know myself if I have this kind of belief. I wish, I hope. But a person endowed with this kind of faith is invulnerable. So have a good night, my friends. We have discussed a few things. Hope that some of the informations were to your liking. Good night, my friends, and God bless you.